Good morning. Good day. Hello, everybody. All right. I'm seeing the chat messages coming in. So good morning, everybody. So we'll get started. Let me start my recording here. Yeah, warm greetings from everywhere. Good to be with you all. My day here is Thursday. So we're going to move to another phase of our stillness and movement journey. And so today we'll be incorporating, maybe expanding from where we were in the stillness and movement journey to include the mind or the thinking mind in our practice. And so maybe if you follow along, we'll begin right here where we are. So I'm going to give a sound of a bell to start. Begin by entering into this body and mind and heart. Maybe this entering has an orientation of a turning inward. Maybe there is a sense of immediacy and sense of a presence coming forth. Each morning, we enter into this temple of this body, mind, and heart, with reverence, with care, tenderness, here and now is where we enter and in which to feel. Settling into a posture, sitting, lying down, standing. And the posture that expresses a kind of an inner alignment, inner harmony, an inner commitment to the practice. Maybe you're feeling the lower half of the body grounding on earth. and torso is uplifted. There is a totality that combines steadiness, balance, and uplift, wakefulness right here. Right here, maybe already feeling a sense of a stillness in the body. Expressed in the posture of sitting. Sitting like a mountain. Maybe just a hint of it, or a hint of a hint, possibility. As one of my teachers often says, what's the felt sense of the body sitting here? Earth element, solid, unmoving, grounding. The movements, it's very natural to be felt with the stillness in the body being in the background. The movements of the breath, expansion and contraction of the torso. Temperature change as you breathe in and out. Like a breeze coursing through a tall mountain. Both the stillness and the movements are present. The flow of the breath enlivens the whole body, giving life. Such a wonder. A life mountain. We already notice the movements of the emotions bubbling up or rippling in. A sense of a wonder, sense of awe, curiosity, the emotions may have a somatic imprints. Or maybe bubbly energy in the body that's related to joy, happiness in the emotions. Feeling and sensing the embodied field of the emotions. Maybe thoughts are coursing through that's related to emotions. Feeling and sensing those movements in the mind, whether they're emotions or thoughts. And just different energy forms that we can feel, we sense. Notice the feeling and sensing as a flavor of quiet stillness right there. Letting go of the stories, content of the thinking. Resting in the felt sense. There is a stillness in the body and stillness in the mind. And there's a stillness in the knowing, in the feeling, the sensing. And there is a movements in the body, movements in the mind, emotions, thoughts, images, words. Without pushing or pulling, and resting in a still, quiet field of knowing. And sensations in the body may be very different right now. The breath has changed. Being available to the wonder of our lives right here and now. Being available to the blossoming of the inner being without wanting, not wanting, preferences, judgments, whatever is here, in whatever form, can be received from a kind, loving, still field. The sound may flow through, sound of my voice, the ambience sound. Noticing the difference between the content of our thoughts versus the felt sense of thinking that's in the embodied field. Thinking may have a somatic, energetic feel to it. It's present, immediate. Content is often detached from the body. What's the felt sense in the body right now? In the movements of the breath. Aware some energetic shift as I transition from a quiet sitting to talking. And as you shift from quiet sitting to listening to the stories and words, you listen from a settled, quiet, open, and loving field. And allow the words to drop in and flow through without grasping to anything in particular. Let whatever might touch you to settle in. So we're transitioning to another Dharma story. The great women disciples, the stories of the great women disciples of the Buddha that I've been speaking about this whole week. But I kind of forgot one thing that I meant to say, so I'm going to put it in now. And that is, I forgot to say that these stories that I've been sharing up till now today, that it's best not to take them as some sort of absolute truth. So many details of these stories were kind of pieced together from parts of the Pali Canon, suttas, and commentaries. And so there's no way that we can be really definitive of all the details that came through. So we hear this with some lightheartedness. And at the same time, maybe each of these stories have certain aspects of the teachings that are meaningful and inspiring for us, and that are supportive for the Dharma path. Maybe that's good enough to consider taking some aspects of this in. And for the parts that are harder to connect and or not connecting at all, we can simply put aside. And this is a kind of an art of learning how to study and work with teachings that are offered in all different forms. And so in the ancient Buddhist traditions, or maybe almost all of the spiritual traditions, storytelling has always been a very vibrant part of the teaching mode. And so because they touch us in some ways that may be quite different from simply receiving a set of instructions, for example. Yeah. Yeah, I'm noticing my internet has a little issue, so I'm just switching to a different internet right now. Hopefully this would work. So today, yet another day, I'm bringing in a story maybe some of you would have already heard. This is a story of Kisa Gotami. And maybe what I'll offer, there'll be some new perspective here as well, even if you may have heard the story of the Kisa Gotami. So Kisa Gotami is said to be born in low caste family, and she's also very frail and weak. She's said to be quite skinny and haggard. Kisa, the word Kisa means fragile or haggard. And so that's what she's known as. And so kind of a very fragile woman. And because of that, it was very hard for her to get married. And that was a challenge itself, I suspect, for a young woman in those days. But there's one day, a rich merchant, a young man, somehow saw her and saw something different inside of her and fell in love with her. And he decided to marry Kisa Gotami, even though the family didn't seem to buy in with this decision. Nevertheless, the young man was quite persistent, and so they got married. And in those days, and maybe even today for some of the parts of the world, when young women get married, and they go to the husband's household to live. And that was tough for Kisa Gotami, because the in-laws often find faults in her, and it was very challenging, even though the young couple seems to love each other very much. At some point, Kisa Gotami was pregnant with a young boy, a baby boy. And when the little boy was born, this changed her life. The young boy was energetic, vibrant, and very cute and handsome. And all the grudges that the in-laws had with her went away. And so you can see how much this meant for Kisa Gotami, in a way that this young boy wasn't just bringing a new life into the family, but also had given Kisa Gotami a sense of life of her own, and her own existence now depends on this young boy. So she was very happy for a while and very contented for a while, but that did not last very long. One day, the boy got sick, and very sick. Quickly, he died. You can imagine the death of this child for Kisa Gotami was more than the death of the young boy, the son, because Kisa Gotami had kind of, her life depends on this boy. So it's as if her life got taken away in this way. The whole family was distraught. They all turned against Kisa Gotami, blaming her, accusing her. And you can imagine, all the stuff that would come up in situations like this. And even her husband began to reject her. This was too much for Kisa Gotami, and a very short time, kind of the whole life changed from upside down. Maybe it was hours and days. And so she started hallucinating and began to imagine things. And so she refused to accept that her son had died. She imagined that he was just sick and needed a medicine to bring him back to normal. So he carried this young boy in her arms and started running from one household to another, asking for medicine and to bring her son back to life. And everyone she met said, "No, your son was dead, and there's no way that you can bring her back." But at some point, she met this one maybe wise, compassionate family who told her, maybe you should see a physician who might be able to offer you a medicine to treat your son. And this physician is the Buddha. So you should go see the Buddha. And so I get the sense that this wise person had sensed something within her, had some sense of hope or wisdom in her. And so he sent Kisa Gotami to the Buddha. So Kisa Gotami now had such a hope, a possibility, sense of a hope and possibility. So she ran to the Pentecost monastery where the Buddha stayed. In the middle of assembly that the Buddha held, she ran right in front of the Buddha in total despair and begged the Buddha, "Please, the Buddha, give some medicine to my son." And the Buddha stopped his teaching right then and kindly, without dismissing her, without blaming, ridiculing, and he responded with these verses that the Kisa Gotami recounted later in the Legends of the Terries. And this was said, "The Buddha, skilled in crafty speech, said, 'Bring me a white mustard seed, collected in whichever home where people dying is unknown.'" Okay, so the Buddha asked the Kisa Gotami to collect white mustard seed from any household that didn't have death in their family. But in those days, the households people live in were kind of generations, generations of people live in those households. It's pretty impossible to find a house that doesn't have anyone died in there. So Kisa Gotami went to each house. Well, first asking for the white mustard seed. Well, mustard seed is very common in Indian cuisine, and so it's one of the spices pretty much everybody uses. So that was no problem. But when she get to the second part of the question, that was unexpected by Kisa Gotami. And so, was there any death? Well, mustard, yes, we have. Mustard seed, yes, we have. But how about if there's any death in the family? And everybody said, yes, there was death. So she came back to the Buddha empty-handed. This journey itself was a powerful teaching right there and then. As she already got a sense, wow, no one escapes death, and this is inevitable. So she said in her poem, "Throwing away my baby's corpse, I went to the Buddha. Having seen me from distance, the Buddha said this to me: 'Better than 100 years of life not seeing how things rise and fall is living for a single day seeing things rising and falling. This is the condition of the entire world, the impermanence of all that is.'" With that, Kisa Gotami opened the Dharma eyes, and she realized the truth of what the Buddha was pointing to. And so this story reminded me many years ago when I did the Sati Center chaplaincy training. And I was going on to the patient rounds in the Kaiser Hospital, and also meeting with cancer patients and their caregivers. I remember very vividly, each time I went and then going back home, it's like being sent for mustard seeds. And again, I came back empty-handed. Who doesn't get sick and who is not going to die? And that hit me very strongly. Wow, this is the truth of our lives. And so there is a reason why these are called divine messengers. Directly and deeply, they start challenging our grasping or the tight grip we may have. on things that are ever changing. And for me, this is still an ongoing, unfolding process. And yet, each time I meet this, there is such a sacredness that's unfolding. I remember in the days when I was meeting with the cancer patients that I was with, each time sitting with them, my gratitude towards everything kind of deepens little by little. And also, I started witnessing the possibilities of liberating right there and then. The advanced cancer patients are moving through kind of the phases of traumatic experience from the beginning and to maybe surviving modes. And in some ways also in some kind of thriving mode that is not necessarily about defining death, but about how they live each moment. And so we had coined a term that we called this group Can Thrive Group. And so, and there is some part of our lives that feels vibrant and thriving in the midst of maybe meeting with illness and fate and the death. And so maybe this teaching from Kisa Gotami offers this possibility for each of us to bow to the sacredness of our life and not to grasp on anything, but open to the possibility to thrive in the midst of all challenges and difficulties, even the facing of a death. So thank you, everyone. You have a wonderful, peaceful day.